Welcome to Tech London, a show featuring interviews with London's top creative entrepreneurs, startups, investors, design agencies, internet marketers, and freelancers that make up the Tech London online community, which mostly lives on the Slack instant messaging platform. We rotate through both hosts and guests for these interviews, so you have the chance to hear from multiple perspectives on London's tech scene.
Hello, folks, and welcome to another Tech London podcast. And in the studio today is our next guest, who's Sanjay. Sanjay, what are you known for, and what would you like to be known for, sir?
What am I known for? I'm not sure, Bernie. I think I'm maybe known for loving coding. I'm definitely addicted, and I think it's not a bad thing to be known for.
That's good. You should also mention your podcast. I thought that's a good spot because that's a good place to kick off on a podcast with a podcast.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Why not? Let's get all meta. So yeah, I myself have a podcast of my own. It's called Ahead in Tech. You can find me on Twitter at Ahead in Tech or my website aheadintech.com. And I basically talk to people I've crossed paths with in the industry over the last several years. And it's about tech careers, helping to inform and sort of educate people on the options out there and how they can get a bit further in their own careers.
And this might sound an even more meta question, but why did you start that podcast? Because it's very helpful.
Thank you. Well, thank you for saying so. That's very nice of you. And that's a good question. So I left my last job maybe about 8 or 9 months ago, maybe about a year or so ago now, almost. And I spent a lot of time thinking about what I was going to do. And then eventually I started writing a book. And I didn't get very far. There was lots of gaps, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to have to go research this and that." And then, I want to do a good job. And then a couple of people said to me, "Why don't you do like a podcast? Then you can interview all these people who have all the answers, and you can slowly build up your knowledge and build up a little audience." And I was like, "Hey, that's a pretty good idea." And also because I had been away from tech for so long, and as I said, and hopefully you can gather throughout the course of the interview, that I am totally addicted to coding, and I love tech, and I love startups, and like all this exciting ecosystem that we live in, and all the crazy things we can do. So I was just really bored, and I was lacking that stimulation. I wanted to speak to people about technology again. So that and a couple of other things sort of came together, and I just went, what, it's really scary and it's all unknown and it's probably going to fail, but who knows, and I just went, screw it, let's do it. And it's gone great so far. It's going very well.
I obviously, that's why I'm doing a podcast. I love podcasting and interviewing people. It is a really good way, because if I said to you, "Oh, Sanjay, do you want to have a coffee?" I mean, like geographically that would be impossible at the moment, but I've got to go and have a coffee. But having a podcast and when you have a podcast, you don't start talking about the weather, because time is really valuable. One thing I wanted to ask you: when did you come out as being addicted to code? Was that when you were like 7 or 25?
No. I mean, my computer. I mean, I have great friends and great family. I've got a very nice full life, but I would always say my computer is my best friend. I've always been great with computers, great with technology, but I never knew how to code. And so I'm 44 now, and I went until the age of, I think I was 37 or 38, something like that, before I took my first steps to learn how to code. And that was in London. I went to a boot camp there called Makers Academy.
Yep.
And that's what kicked it all off for me, really.
I thought you were going to say I first started coding in 1990 or something like that. That gives me hope. That actually relates to another guest we had, Suzanne Noble, who is she runs I think it's called Startup Seniors. Okay. And it's amazing how many people like the wrong side of 40 like us or older get into start businesses or make career changes. And probably like our parents' generation definitely our parents' generation were like one job for life. And do you think technology enables us to change career?
I don't know if it's technology per se, but it's opened up so many opportunities for people. And I suppose that's the pull. And then the push is that there are less opportunities and less sort of safety and security. with everything else. So yeah, as you say, our parents' generation, they would have had one job for life. Generations today, they're going to have many, many jobs, and they're probably going to switch careers many times. The world is changing so quickly, and everything's so uncertain. Everything's changed.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been an accurate thing to say, like kind of in the end of 2019, and it's an even more accurate thing to say now. What as you've interviewed people, is there a thread that comes out that you think, oh, that's it, that you didn't realize before? Is there like something people do, or something people talk about, or a concern, or what's kind of bubbling around in your head at the end of those podcast interviews so far?
Yes, sir. That is a good question. So two things immediately come to mind. One is the discrimination that women still face, because so I've interviewed a lot of women, and my if I can trust my metrics, the limited metrics that I do have, over 60% of my audience are women, which is really great for me to know. And I'm really happy that I'm reaching women as well, and not only women, but people from all sorts of diverse walks of life. And I think one definitely is that women are still discriminated against, and even there are really great places with great cultures, and they do very well there, and they're all very happy there. But in a lot of places, it's still very subtle things, like they'll be held back from promotions, they'll be given busy work and then punished for it later, and so on. We can go into that later, I suppose. And the other thing is, my brain's just gone. Hopefully you can edit this out. The other thing is, sorry, that's my imposter syndrome kicking in, which is perfect, because that's exactly what I was going to talk about. Everyone has imposter syndrome, and particularly the more senior people have it even worse. And if they're in a good place, they tend to acknowledge that, and they make it easier for people under them to have those feelings of weakness or vulnerability and be okay with it, So instead of being like a Shark Tank, where as soon as there's blood in the water, everyone goes and like kills the weak, it's very much more like, I don't know, whatever the opposite of a Shark Tank would be, somewhere very nice and nurturing, where people accept that we're all human and we have these feelings.
A Brené Brown book. They're two really, really good points. They're really important to a lot of, like, I spend a lot of time in the co-working movement, and we run this project called the Co-working Idea Project, which idea is inclusion, diversity, equality, and accessibility. And probably about 5 years ago, now we've made it into a big thing, but we've been having all these type of conversations. And I thought I was a well-rounded human being. And as we've, because we've had to research it and talk about it more, and spread the message. And when you're a white male like me wandering through London, it's an incredibly different world, incredibly more privileged world. Not just economically, but like access and assumptions are very different to people of color and women in particular. And I'm amazed. Yes. There's one group called Women Who Co-work, who we do a lot of work with. And I think it is the United Nations did a load of research, and they issued a report, which sounds boring, but it will take like 100 years for gender equality to actually realistically happen in the workplace. It's something ridiculous like that. Yeah. I'm going to put a link in the show notes to that, folks, so you can fact check me on that. And do you know Color in Tech?
Color in Tech? No, I don't know that.
We'll put a link in the show notes to that too. It's a whole movement, and supported by Google and Microsoft and lots of big people like that. But they run. I would urge you all to immediately sign up for their newsletter, which comes out once a week, and it is full of. It's very. I'd say on point, sharp, and witty. It's like listening to Chuck D from Public Enemy, like highlight shortcomings in the industry, and it's very constructive as well. And like things you pick up in there are amazing. So I follow that a lot, because you don't. I'm not don't mean like down on white men, but you don't realize until it's pointed out to you how the world occurs for other people. Does that sound okay?
Absolutely. I would completely agree. And I mean, as a brown man or Asian man, whatever way you want to put it, I mean, I feel discriminated against in many aspects of my life, but absolutely not in my career. I would say, in tech, you and I, white and brown men, we are the sort of majority, really, aren't we? And we've got to help other people get into our industry. It makes things better for all of us.
I think that's because I struggle about like how to act around it and helping other people get in. Like my neighbor here in our co-working space explained what equity is. And by, like both you and me, Sanjay, if we help other people who may not get access in, or actually it's not necessarily about access, and do correct me if I'm not spelling this out right, it's about inviting people in who don't know they're allowed to be invited. Because I mean, very like in co-working, I don't know, I've never met a co-working space that is, racist, but not at all. But
no,
when you go to their, particularly in Shoreditch, and not so much now, to be fair, but 5 years ago, most co-working spaces had beautiful white men with perfect teeth and cappuccinos looking at Apple Mac computers, talking about their startup. So then when anyone else came in, even I, who was part of the co-working movement, was a bit shy about going into some spaces because they just seemed too cool. I felt like an old man going into Studio 54. I felt really out of place, even though no one in there, I think would, even if I know the community manager or owner, I felt out of place. So imagine what like an Asian woman who's just learned how to code 2 weeks ago would feel.
Absolutely agree. And I agree wholeheartedly with you pointing out equity there. I read a great quote the other day, which was equality is being invited to the party and equity is being asked to dance. So it's not enough that we say, yeah, sure, you have all the same chances as we do, but we have to make sure that really everything follows through to the end, that people do really have all the same opportunities and are treated as well as the rest of us are. And I hasten to add, actually, I think London is a great place. I mean, I've lived in several places. You have multicultural experiences of your own, and I think we're really blessed in the UK. I think people are great. I don't think people, by and large, are racist at all. And I think there's a lot of pushback against people because I feel like, oh no, why am I being asked to think about race or women or like gay people or transsexual people or whatever? I'm not against them. I'm not going to hold them back. But the thing is, we've all got to give them a little bit of a leg up. We've got to point out issues when we see them, and we've got to, because there'll still be the occasional person who will not be an ally, who will be on the wrong side, and we've got to make sure we've got to be allies.
Yeah, allies. For me personally, that's a very attractive thing to be, and as I've had it spelt out to me by, because I've asked, there's been situations where I've said things like, I was in a meeting where there were 8 white people, 2 of which were female, talking about co-working and regeneration in a very ethnically diverse part of London, and I said, something in me makes me want to say, like, we must look out that there's like a lot of us making decisions. A lot of white people here and 2 women making decisions about a very ethnically diverse thing, and everyone went quiet. And I felt like I should apologize. And there was like this silence on the call for 30 seconds, which is a very long time on a Zoom call with people that don't know each other very much. And I really thought I'd done something wrong. And then someone started talking, and they didn't acknowledge what I said. They just started talking and oh yeah, we should think about what color we're going to make the chairs. And then I went back to another group of people and I said, relayed the same story. And they said, if I'd said that, I would have been the miserable old feminist. And if I'd been that, I would have been the black person with a chip on my shoulder. And like, cause you're the white guy, you can say that. And it does feel uncomfortable, but like, it's way less uncomfortable for you than we say that. And that might seem really obvious to people listening to this and yourself, but that was a revelation for me. I didn't realize that I could, highlight things like that and upset white people, even though they didn't really mean any harm,
Yeah. And I mean, they're probably not bad people, right? They're probably,
They're definitely
No.
bad people.
But these things have to be pointed out. And like you say, I think it's much easier for us to do it. Even me, I'm not white. As an Asian male, I feel like it's my job to be speaking about diversity and inclusion issues. Because in the beginning, like, for example, in my podcast, I was kind of asking the question a lot to the women that I had on. And then it kind of occurred to me that actually they're like the victims. It's not, I shouldn't be asking them. I should be holding other men to account, other white people to account, and asking them, what they're doing about it, or what their experiences are, because ultimately we're the ones that are going to help fix this, right?
Definitely. I need to unelegantly jump to the difference between contracting and permanent work, because that's also really interesting. And I'm conscious of our time. So can you say that? That's, I think, for a lot of people, why I'm particularly keen to ram that into what we're talking about is because even before COVID, the freelancer contract versus permanent kind of conversation, but there's a lot of people that have become accidental freelancers, entrepreneurs, whatever you want to call yourself, as a result of lockdown and the economic turnaround, whatever the word is. So what would you share from your own experience, and have you got any nuggets of advice for people?
Yeah, this is something I would love to talk about, for ages. I mean, it's such an interesting thing, but the waters were muddy before, and now they're even more muddied because of the IR35 changes, which I don't know. Have you ever been a contractor? Do you know what IR35 is?
I know what IR35 is because we have a whole freelance movement thing. If you're listening, folks, there's a Facebook group called Freelance Heroes, which is 11,000 UK-based freelancers. Oof. And we when we run a newsletter called This Week in Freelancing, and IR35 is a sticky issue. So we can definitely spend some time digging into that. I don't want to rush you through this very important share here.
Sure. I feel like IR35 is a tax regulation, which basically means if you're contracting, if that's your tax situation, but for all intents and purposes, you're actually acting as a full-time employee, then you should be taxed as a full-time employee. So it's a really bad sticking point for contractors now, because it's gone into effect in the UK, and essentially you lose out a lot of the financial benefit, but you don't gain back any of the other company side benefits. So you'll be paying more tax and your national insurance and PAYE and this and that, but then you won't be getting a pension or healthcare, and you still won't be able to get a lot of the other benefits that other permanent employees have. So it's in a bit of a difficult situation at the moment, and I mean, they've obviously done that for tax reasons. They want to, the exchequer wants to make more money, which is understandable. And if we take a step back, I think contracting or freelancing, as we know in the UK, in most industries is probably not a desirable thing, because you have the lack of security and uncertainty of like a permanent role. You don't know when you're going to get your next role, or when you may be surplus to requirement and lose your current role. Whereas I feel like in the tech industry, there's so much demand that if you're going contracting, you're almost certainly going to have a job. There's probably not going to be many points in your life where you're not going to have a job, or, know that the next one's probably around the corner, So I suppose that's one thing, but probably one of the main motivators for me for going into contracting was to carry on progressing in my career. I think at that stage I felt quite confident, and I was quite sort of brave, and I didn't have all the answers, but I was getting to the point where I could see just over the horizon, well, I'm about to get to a point where I could probably work anything out. So, I'm not too scared of things. So, I kind of jumped into it, and it was an amazing move. It's the best move that I've made anyway. I've made a lot of great moves that I'm very, very happy about, personally. But this was brilliant fun. It's a great way to because, as I explained, I joined the industry very late. So I wanted to get a lot of experience in a lot of different companies. I wanted to start padding my CV, and I wanted to start working my way up the ladder. And of course, the money is very nice as well. Because I think within the space of about 9 months, I had left my permanent job, and I had went through two contract roles, and I was about to start my third contract role. And I think my take-home pay had probably about doubled in that 9 months. So that's a huge deal. That's really important, especially when you're thinking about, I'm big on saving. I'm always saving. I'm always investing. There's a movement called FIRE, Financial Independence, Retire Early, which you or your listeners may have heard of.
I haven't heard of it, but I'm there.
No? Okay, cool.
Actually,
yeah.
I don't want to retire early. I just don't want to worry about money later in life. I can't see myself retiring and playing golf, but I can definitely would like to, be able to go and buy a boat and not have to look at my bank balance.
Yeah. And, contracting used to be a great way to do that. And I think it's still not bad. I think there's still people who are doing very well. I think the market has just shrunk a lot. So, if you have the CV for it, if you have the courage, if you think you can make it work, I think it's still the best path to take, but it's not as easy as it used to be in the UK anyway.
There's a few questions there. So when you, what do you think about CVs? Because I've never had a CV. I had a CV like 20 years ago, and
right.
I certainly don't mean I haven't got two private jets on standby, but I've been freelance, if you like, or independent for 20 years. And it's only at the end of last year that I got a job in a company, but that was because it came from a group of people I worked with. So I would never have applied for a job in a company like I work for, but I just got told I had to go and work here, and it was with the gang. So I went. But everything's become everything's become word of mouth. And that always sounds like such an idiot thing to say, all my work comes by referral. But it's because for a lot of people, I'm the only person they know who knows anything about co-working. I don't even know that much. So that's happened. But the idea of where I was going with this question, sorry, Sanjay, is is it a paper CV, or is it do you say to people, look at my LinkedIn? I've got a really obnoxious attitude towards this, but I'd like to know your, I'd like to know your grown up attitude.
Okay, sure. And then I'd love to hear your obnoxious attitude. That sounds entertaining. I think, so for me, the CV is absolutely important. I think the LinkedIn is a great way to sort of back that up. LinkedIn is a fantastic platform. I'm a huge fan only because it's got me so many jobs. It's, there's a lot of chaff there as well. But there's a lot of opportunities, to be had as well. So I think LinkedIn is brilliant. But I've gotten all of my jobs off my CV, and I think the CV is super, super important. And one of the two biggest things I think that really solidified my career trajectory was a point in my life where I kind of totally redid my whole CV. I think, sorry to sound so immodest, I think I struck gold in my own personal way. I think I nailed it, whatever it was, it was just speaking to people. And my CV from 1 week to the second week, it went from maybe a 20 to 30%, callback rate to 100%, within 24 hours. Anyone who saw my CV was calling me for interviews. So I think CV is super important, and you should definitely put a lot of work into it. And, there's CV writing services, which I personally wouldn't recommend, but there's a lot of great resources, especially on places like Reddit. There's a lot of fantastic subreddits CS questions or learning programming. And they do they have a lot of sticky posts. Once a week, they'll do CV reviews, or they'll have a once every 6 months or once a year, post your best CV. And I think that is a great place to start. If things are not going amazingly for you, or if you think there's even any gap in your CV, any room for improvement, or you haven't touched it in a long time, my personal opinion is you should definitely put a lot of work into that.
Well, what was the tweak or a couple of tweaks you made to your CV? Because I always feel like CVs need to begin a well-rounded, resourceful individual. Like,
Passionate about coding. I love walks on the beach. I don't know. I wouldn't go with any of that. I think for me, the problem was, so like, broadly speaking, you have two types of CVs. You have the functional CV. That's where, you don't have a lot of relevant career experience. That's very typical for a boot camp grad, as I was, and all my peers were. And that's more like a saying, I've done these sorts of things and I'm really good at these sorts of things, and I think that could apply to coding, And so the CV I had was a kind of evolution of that. It was morphing into a chronological CV, which is the other kind. But it wasn't quite there. And it was kind of like I'd started from like a crappy CV, and I just kind of kept improving a little bit, but it was just crap. It just it was like polishing a turd, right? So I just had to go back to a drawing board, and I was like, what do people want to see? They want to see the buzzwords. They want bullet points. They want to scan it. They want to know, cool, you've worked with this tech, you've done this stuff, you've achieved this. And it's just a way of getting past the screener, basically. It's the first hurdle. It'll be a recruiter or like a manager or someone that scans that. And then they'll pass it on to tech people. And then that's when you get to really get into deep conversations and explain to them exactly what you know and why you're the right person for this role. So for me, I think it was just really burning it to the ground, starting again, and looking at it from the other side. So not coming at it from me, Sanj, this is my CV, this is who I am. I came at it from the total opposite angle, going, someone looking at me, what would they need to know immediately right away? Not even everything, not even the best things about me. Just what do they need to know right away for them to just scan the page and go, okay, cool, this guy's good. Let's get him in.
That's I think that's really accurate. I don't like CVs, but I think that's really accurate. Like, because when you have to look through like even 20, there's probably like hundreds. There's probably some poor person out there that has to read hundreds of CVs. And I think when my listener, I haven't researched this is my gut feel, but like if you get information really fast, it will, it's like in copywriting, we say the purpose of the first line is to get you to read the second line, and the purpose of the second line is to get you to read the third line. So that's how I go about it. Did you like take on? Did you like do any courses, or I mean, I know you did the boot camp, but like, did you do any how to double your freelance rate, or kind of books or courses that helped you go out as an independent economic agent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, I did a pretty early in my career, maybe 6 to 9 months after I started, my company, Compare the Market, which is a brilliant place to work with great culture, really wonderful people. I have nothing to gain from this. I'm just letting you know that they're fantastic people, and I still keep in touch with them. So they sent me on this course at City University called Advanced JavaScript. And that was like a part-time, once a week, like evening course. Like I think it was like maybe 8 weeks or 10 weeks or something like that, 2 hours, one night a week. And that just helped reinforce a lot of the fundamentals for me. So I found that really useful. I read maybe a handful of books, the usual suspects that people will know. I spent a lot of time reading documentation. I spent a lot of time working on side projects. Like for me, I'm not really much of a reader. I'm more of a doer, and it's not easy. And, the learning comes slow, but for me, I find that's the best way I kind of gradually built up my knowledge. So I would spend, maybe some people would consider this to be sad, but I loved what I did. And I probably spent half of my spare time for the bulk of my career, either working on my own website or a side project, or writing like an open source repo, or contributing to other people's open source repos, or blogging. All those things really help you learn, especially the blogging. I haven't blogged much recently, but I did go through a phase of maybe a year or two where I spent maybe like months researching and writing blogs. And they always start off as like, oh yeah, I'm going to write about optimization, or like, browser persistence. And I'll be, oh yeah, I'll be done in probably 2 weeks. And, like 6 months later, you've gone through tons and tons of research and learning and conversations, and finally you're able to produce something you're proud and happy of, and that gets out there and is well received, and and there's helping our community of peers. So for me, that was a great way to learn.
I think like that whole little last section about blogging, that is the thing I love most on the internet. So I would go and work. I will go and hunt down so many people who were just like, and that's one of the, I'm not a coder or a programmer, but something I've always appreciated is the geeky, techie, open sourcey. I think there's a few other words out there where people just like bar campy, unconferencey people who, as I would deliberately, I'd rather spend £50 to go to a bar camp with a group of people that blog because they just want to get it out their system and share their knowledge than spend like, $1,000 going to see some jacked up, motivational speaker tell me how to build my 10x my business. And I just learned, I've learned so much of people with not the most beautiful looking blogs, but with the really, geeky stuff. And it's a very generous thing. And a lot of the best people on the internet that are probably well known say, there's a few people. We used to do a London bloggers meetup podcast, and we had all these hotshot people we'd interview, and we'd say, oh, what do you think? What's your recommendation about wearing? About blogging, and they'd all say like, just do it. And also they'd just say, they'd say blog even if no one's reading it, because you writing the discipline of writing that stuff and putting it on the internet means you will get over that bit of imposter syndrome you alluded to earlier, but also you'll learn so much. And that's my mate. I podcast because if I wrote this out, it would take ages, like you said, and I enjoyed it. But so I can deliver that quicker. But I love the writing thing, and I've never got to the stage where I know how to write. It's like a never-ending quest. Which I a few years ago I accepted that I'll be doing this until I die, just like writing. And it's that lifelong learning thing, which it sounds like you're pretty into.
Yeah, absolutely. And we work in a fantastic industry where there's so much sharing and giving back, and we've benefited so much from that. It's the least we can do to give back a little, right? Even if it's crap and no one reads it, just do it.
Definitely. Look, Sanjay, I've got to go, man.
No worries.
I've really enjoyed this. And we will come back and do this again. We'll put links in the show notes, obviously, but like, where can people find you online?
Yeah, please check out my website, aheadintech.com. That'll kind of shoot you off to everywhere else. Or you can follow me on Twitter at aheadintech. And I'll be wrapping up my first season soon and starting my second season of my podcast, where I'm going to pivot a little and make it a little bit more interactive and exciting. And it's all to help our fellow London techies. So please check it out. Let me know what you think. I really love hearing from my audience. So please get in touch.
I will. Thank you. I've really enjoyed this day. Ladies and gentlemen, there'll be a little trailer from Jonathan about where you can find us online. And we're always looking for interesting people to podcast with from the London tech scene. So do not hesitate to get in contact. Come and find us in the Slack channel, and take care of yourselves, folks. And cheers for listening today.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernie. Cheers. This has been brilliant. I've loved this as well.
You've been listening to the Tech London Show. If you're interested in joining the community or even making an appearance on this show, make sure you join our Slack group over at techlondon.io. Till next time.